How you doing, Bobby?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Are we ready?
I didn't know we were rolling in.
Oh yeah, we always just
We just
roll.
rolled in.
We just rolled in.
Okay. No personal information up front this time. I think last time we started, I was asking information about where everyone's kids went to school.
Oh yeah,
I did a bunch of everything you
your
don't
address.
do on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Social security number.
Now that we know.
Yeah.
Now that we know.
Yeah.
Where
Nope.
you bank.
And we caught Mike off guard with
I
the
know.
video this time.
I know. Poor Mike.
Yeah.
All right, Mike. How you doing?
I'm well.
Thanks for being
Thank
here.
you. Of course. Anything for you, Travis. Always.
And it
forever.
begins.
I'm going to remind you
The
of that.
bromance begins.
The bromance continues.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go.
Yeah, that's right. You're muted anyway. So.
Wow.
No, just kidding.
Who are you?
We love you, Bobby.
Yeah, we're a little tense today, you and I.
I know we need to
need to
sort
work
out.
through our
We need to work
issues
through our
right now.
issues. Yeah, I'm sorry, Bobby, that I didn't answer your call. You forgive me?
Maybe we'll
Okay.
talk after.
Yikes. Okay, here we go. Well, Mike, we are talking about trusts. Everyone's favorite topic.
So exciting.
You know what though? It kind of is because we asked for some questions and we got some, and I was just talking to a client and I was telling her we were meeting with you, and she's like, "Oh, when's that thing releasing?" Like, soon. Don't you worry. It's exciting. People have a lot of questions. Maybe we start by just telling us what is a trust.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a timely thing, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, you probably know this better than I because you track these kind of things, but we're on the precipice of the greatest transfer of wealth in human history as the baby boomer generation declines. So I think estate planning is something, although it's not like super exciting, it's like getting insurance or dental cleaning. It is a necessary thing. It is. So in response to your question, a trust is basically a contract that manages and distributes a collection of whatever you want, you know, property, money, personal property, whatever.
Okay.
That wasn't a very good answer.
It's a contract between who?
That's a good question. It's a contractual relationship between the settlor. Let me just go through some of the technical terms. We'll start there.
Yeah.
Okay. There's the settlors, or settlor is a person that starts a trust. Okay. There's the trustees, which are the people that are put in charge of managing the items that are placed in the trust. Then there's the beneficiaries, who are the people that receive the benefit of the trust.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so it's a collection of assets that is bound by a contractual document that tells the trustee from the settlors what to do with the assets.
Got it.
That was very well stated. I'm gonna remember that one.
I'm telling you,
Yeah.
this guy.
This is why you're
Mike
where-
Pick.
This is why you're in that chair. Mike.
Yeah. So there are living trusts, right? And other trusts. Like, can you maybe explain some different types of trusts and when they might be used?
Absolutely. I think for the most part, there's two differentiations, or there's a living trust and a testamentary trust. A living trust is a trust that's created when someone's alive. All right. A testamentary trust is created when someone dies.
It's created after
Their death.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's the documents that are in place to create it, but it's created after they die.
Oh, how?
Why would that?
Yeah, that seems. Go ahead, Bobby.
Help. Why would somebody do that?
Question.
Yeah.
in the back.
They're not as in fashion now. The living trust is really the implementation tool that's really kind of more in vogue for estate planning right now for a number of reasons. But I'll tell you, the big reason for a living trust is that the other layer of categorization is irrevocable or revocable trust, which is just a fancy word for, can I amend it? Can I change the trust? So an irrevocable trust is a trust that's set up that can never be changed. It's done. A revocable trust can be changed during the settlor's lifetime to amend as things progress.
Okay.
So kids get older, whatever life changes happen. So typically the tool that's used in trust creation is a living revocable trust.
What would be the benefit of having an irrevocable?
That's what I was
trust?
going to ask.
Yeah, there are
Great question, Bobby. Look at you.
Right.
Journalism at its finest.
In my personal practice, I've never worked on a irrevocable trust.
Okay.
I just don't. It's just something I can't, for my clients, perceive a situation where you'd want that. However, there are situations where people do want something set in stone and don't want it to change for either tax purposes or whatever the gifting purpose is.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Interesting. Okay. But nothing that we know of right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
Why would
I'm
you not
thinking about it? Yeah.
want to change it? Okay.
Well, I mean, there's situations where, as I said, the settler's intent, the person that creates it, sometimes don't want that to be modified in any way, shape, or form. So that is a firewall to disallow it to be challenged later. And so sometimes that's built into what's called, trust contest clauses in trust, that if someone challenges the words of a trust, they can be disinherited, et cetera, et cetera. So it has to be a pretty strong reason, in my mind, to not make it amendable.
Okay.
So there's one aspect of a trust that's used for like dissemination of assets. And then there's another component where there's like a protection of those assets, correct? Like the purpose for a trust is to protect the assets, correct? Or am I way off base? So there's like, okay, I have a living trust I set up, I pass away, it's clear like what goes where, all that kind of stuff. But like, is there an aspect of putting assets into a trust that protects those assets somehow?
Well, if you're talking about like protection from judgment creditors or something like that, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, and like going to probate and stuff like that, right?
Okay.
And I mean, I guess that's how the assets get disseminated after death. But like, anything with like taxes or liability, anything like that, is there advantages there?
There absolutely is.
Okay.
So I think the way I'd answer this is kind of comparing how you deal with your stuff after you die, either through probate or through a trust. Maybe that'll kind of answer that question in a backdoor way. So, when a trust is established, it doesn't have to go through probate, which is just a fancy word going through court. And the advantage of that is it doesn't become public record. Like no one knows what you have because nothing's filed in court. It's simple. It requires a trustee to do it, not necessarily an attorney to do it. So there's no cost associated with that. So that in a way that protects your assets from having to be exposed in a court proceeding with creditors' claims or something like that against your estate. Did that kind of answer your question in a way?
Yep.
So if you have a will versus a trust, you go to court in probate for a will. You have to file a petition. Someone's appointed to, represent the estate. Then you have to do an inventory and appraisal. That's public record. Everybody knows how much you died with. Then there's a petition to disseminate it after paying everybody afterwards. So it's a really public process. Where a trust, you just skip all that. You just skip it. It just is distributed the way it's set up in the trust.
So you can save money by not having to go through the court. You can create clarity on where the assets go. And then there's privacy too.
Yeah.
That you can.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And those are just some of the advantages. And there's there's tax. There's tax advantages too, but for that kind of, that's super complicated and usually in expensive estates or estates worth something, there's a CP involved as well. So
yeah, we just know from the real estate side, like personally, that's my only experience with it, and it seems to be that the deals I've dealt with where there's a trust involved versus going through the court system and probate, you are gifting your family such a better, cleaner experience, really helping them out if you have this in place.
No, you're absolutely right. And the other advantage of a trust is it can be done very quickly. Like a court proceeding for probate can last up to 2-3 years. It takes forever stuck in probate. I'm sure you heard people complain about that. Whereas a trust is a really effective way to do it on an expeditious basis.
How long does it take to set up the trust, and what's the cost involved?
Those are really good questions. Typically, it takes about 60 days, something like that, from my practice. So I'll just tell you what I do is I send a questionnaire to a potential client. They fill it out. It's like 30 pages.
Oh,
it's
wow.
a lot of information. So I could determine what the best route to go is. I get that back. I draft documents, and I usually do like a kind of comprehensive estate plan. So it's not just a trust. And then after that, the trust is signed and created. And then we start putting assets in the trust. So about 60 days, I'd say.
Is there a best practice on what assets you recommend go into that trust, or is it just situation by situation?
I recommend always the real property. So if there's real property in the state, larger accounts, that kind of thing. There's some things you don't have to put into a trust, like life insurance or pension plans or something like that. Those will already have a beneficiary designated typically. Some investment accounts already have a beneficiary designated, so you don't have to put that in your trust. But real estate and your big accounts.
Okay.
And cost. You asked about cost.
Oh, yeah.
So typically it's a flat fee. So there's kind of a metric that if it's an estate worth $5 million or more, it gets a little more complicated. $5 million or below is a little less complicated.
Shoot, mine's going to be pretty complicated.
Yeah. So it's usually a flat fee. Attorneys do it for flat fees. So I would say for a couple that has a home and has some kids, a couple bank accounts, et cetera, it should be no more than $3,000 to $5,000, somewhere in there.
Okay.
It's usually done by a flat fee.
Which when you look at, all of the advantages of having a trust, especially just cost to cost, probate's going to cost more.
What if they want to add things
Right?
to the trust after setting that up? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think a lot of times, it really is, because a lot of things I deal with after the fact in court is someone set up a trust and they didn't get an asset into the trust. Then you got to go to court to tell the court this asset was supposed to be in the trust. And that's problematic because you're back in probate.
Right.
So that's part of the job I take serious after we create the trust, is assisting clients getting their assets in the trust. So whether that's by deeding it, really. So if it's a bank account, make sure it's Joe and whoever as co-trustees, same as a deed on a piece of property as co-trustees. You just got to make sure it's vested that way. Adding to your trust, most trusts have language what the powers of the trustees are, and that's to move properties in and out. So it's very easy to put something inside a trust. Typically, in the estate plans I do, there's a schedule in the back that identifies or itemizes the assets in a trust. So what I tell clients is just keep updating that as you go. You buy a house, you add a new account, whatever the case may be, just put that in that schedule. And really that's not, it's beneficial to keep track of it, but it's also that if you die, whoever becomes successor trustee knows what to look for and where to marshal all the assets.
Got it. Okay.
When should somebody set up a trust? Because I can imagine some listeners thinking, yeah, I just bought my first home and we don't have a lot of money, but would you recommend, well, you just bought a home, you should set up a trust and put it in the trust? Yeah.
So I look to kind of the California legislature on guidance on that. And so right now, if you die with $180,000 or less of assets, then you could avoid probate. So that's, if you have any assets that's a conglomerate adds up to more than that, then you should get an estate plan. And I would recommend a trust. But that number is kind of the break point. If you die, if you have kids or a wife, it'll go to them. You'll just have to go to court to do it.
Yeah.
So I would say that there's a couple of layers to that. If you have real property, I would create a trust. If you have assets that are more than $180,000, I'd create a trust. If you have children, I'd create a trust. So you can nominate a guardian in that. So you can tell someone to take care of my kids and use my money to take care of my kids in the process. So I don't know if there's a magic answer to that.
Yeah.
But I think those are kind of some of the parameters I look at when talking to people about potentially establishing a trust.
Okay.
You mentioned when we started that this is a timely conversation because of the transfer of generational wealth. I don't know even how to ask the question, but why? Because wouldn't they have already set up the trust? Or are you saying people are beginning to set up trusts knowing kind of this transfer is happening in the next 10, 20 years because baby boomers are getting older? Is that what you mean?
I think there is, just like anything else, there's people that approach lawyers or estate planning with a high degree of somewhat suspicion.
Sure.
They do, because they don't understand what estate planning is. So I think what we're going to see in the next 10 to 15 years is the baby boomer generation declines and their assets start to be transferred, is if they don't have an estate plan, the courts are just going to be glutted up with probates.
Yeah.
Because, if there isn't a will or a trust in place, then you still have to go to probate to what's called intestate succession, meaning someone without an estate plan. You still have to go to court to see where those assets go.
Okay, I got a really dumb question.
Sure. No such thing.
Wait,
it is Travis.
Just give it time. You hang around with me long enough. What's the difference between a will and a trust?
So a trust.
He's like, idiot.
No. So that's a really good question. It really is. A will takes effect when you die.
Okay.
It's you telling the world, I want this to happen when I die. A trust, when we're talking about a living trust, happens right away. So you create the trust now to start managing your assets through the trust now versus when you die.
But if you have a will, does that help you avoid probate?
It can.
It can. Okay.
So typically, and this is kind of the universe of the estate planning I do, when I take on a client, when I create a trust, I'll also do a will. And the will I always prepare is called a pour over will. And what that means is it's pour over in nature, that if there's any assets that weren't inside the trust, then they should have been poured over in to the trust. So it's kind of a backup plan in case, like we talked about, someone didn't get their assets in the trust. There's a will in place that if you have to go to court and show the court, hey, this asset was supposed to be in the trust, it's supposed to pour over into the trust, you have that in place.
Okay. I have so many asset jokes I want to say, but
Okay.
okay. Okay. So you kind of covered like steps in creating a trust. We talked about some specific circumstances that make it advantageous. How about selecting the trustee? What kind of guidance would you give on that?
That's a really good question.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
This is all I do.
I
man.
know this
This is what I do.
It's really tough. It is, because a lot of the litigation I'm involved in is fights over trustees, and it's usually siblings
Yeah.
over grandma's or dad's estate where someone's mad they didn't get a piece of the pie or something to that extent. So I always challenge people to really, really think hard about it. If you're going to have a child, do it. Make sure it's the responsible one. If you're going to have multiple children, make sure they get along. It really is a case-by-case situation. Now, sometimes when there isn't someone that's a viable option, that's a friend or family, you can nominate a professional fiduciary to do it. So someone that's all they do is their job is to come in and be a trustee for a trust. So there's a lot of factors that go into that decision, and that's something that should be revisited. I think one of the questions is that how often should you revisit your trust? So what I do is I send out a tickler letter about every 5 years to clients saying, hey, dust it off, make sure it looks good, there's no changes because kids age, people die, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something that could be liquid. I mean, what you can nominate as your successor
Try.
Yeah, right. They're supposed to.
Right.
I'll
got
say
it.
that.
Oh my
Legally
gosh.
speaking, you're absolutely right. The trust is the document that dictates how a trustee acts. But does that always happen? No.
Oh,
So
I know.
No, man. Family's tough.
Family is tough.
It
It brings
is.
out a different side of people. I mean, we've seen it firsthand dealing with, real estate transactions and stuff. So yeah, you
You're
want to
so
believe
spot on.
that people
Yeah.
won't ever behave like that, but yeah,
When there's a lot of money involved,
Yeah.
it
Any money
get
involved.
weird.
Yeah.
It's weird. I always say there's two things that bring out the best and worst in people: war, and also when someone dies that's leaving them something.
Yes.
Honestly, some people rise to the occasion in a gracious, effective manner, but some people get so weird.
Yeah.
Like they just get greedy and controlling. It's actually a sad statement
It
to the
is.
human condition.
Yeah.
It really is.
How much of your job is like mediation between trustee and other parties affected? Like, do you do that or
I try to. I mean, it depends on the role I'm in. If I'm representing a trustee, my job is to make sure the trustee's doing their job. That's it. If I'm representing a beneficiary that is calling out a trustee for not doing their job, it's a little different. So mediation is, in the litigation term, is something that's always used as a tool for effective, problem solving. But really, that's not super the role when you're just advising a certain client as to what they're doing in
Right.
relation to an estate.
dang? Okay. Any common misconceptions, pitfalls that people should be aware of when they're considering setting up a trust?
Yeah, I think so. I thought about that question a little bit, and
Yeah.
I think one of the things is everybody thinks, "Oh, I don't need one.
Right.
I don't
Right.
need one. I don't need that." What I would say about that is, if you reach out to do an estate plan, then also what comes with that typically, not only the wills and the trust, but also durable power of attorneys and advanced healthcare directives. And that's a really important part of estate planning because, for instance, what happens if there's an adult child with divorced parents and they get in an accident, and then there's a fight that is carried over from the divorce into who controls, who makes decisions on their behalf. That's a bad example of it, but it happens quite a bit. It really does. So I think one of the misconceptions is I don't need one. So they're not that expensive, that they're that prohibitive, that if you have something, then just do it. I mean, that's the way I look at it. It may not be spot on to your question, but
yeah, no, that's good.
I think everybody can value from some type of estate planning.
Yeah. I mean, that's where Jen and I kind of were for the longest time. It's like, well, we have a house, but I mean, we don't really like, we'll do it when we're older.
Right. That's something my grandma does.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I'm not ready to set up a trust.
Yeah. I know. No, there's that perception.
Yeah.
There really is.
Right.
So.
Well, when you were saying that earlier, I was like, what a gift to do that. If your kids are, starting their life, going to be, taking on property, whatever phase of life they're in, what a gift just to get that done.
Yeah, man.
I didn't realize it was so fluid that you could move things in and out of it. And once it's set up. So that seems like, why not? Why not just
Why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah.
Well, we know what we're doing this afternoon.
Yeah.
Setting up trust.
Fun
Fun.
time.
Yeah, we know how to party.
I would say the other thing to that, things that go wrong is what we talked about earlier, is not getting stuff in the trust.
Oh, right.
Some people just fail because they established a trust 10 years ago. They forget about it. Then they sold a house, moved, and then all of a sudden their last house isn't in the trust. So I think that that happens quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Listener question. We were trying to figure out how to ask this because it's a little bit complicated, but we'll ask the best we can. And then you tell us what you think, Mike. Okay. Setting up.
So I'm glad you're taking the lead with this one.
You want to do it?
I'm just here for fun. Go for it.
Jeez. So in the process of setting up a trust, and if something were to happen to one party, they trust the other party to do the right thing with the assets, right? So, but if something happens to both of them, they want all that information to be in there so that it's clear. So how can you write up a trust where if something happens to me, I might not want my partner to be bound by all of these rules, but if something happens to both of us, then we do want these things to happen. So
yeah, can you just make your partner exempt from all that? Like, how does that work?
That's a really good question, and it happens a lot. And let me tell you the circumstance that it comes up in, and then I can answer this a little better.
Okay.
Oftentimes, a trust is made, and then one of the spouses die, right? Younger or unexpectedly. So one of the things that some estate planners do is they create a split of the trust into two subtrusts at that time. There's a trust A and a trust B. And what that does is it protects half of the assets in each. There's taxation purposes of it, but also to protect the assets. So imagine this husband and wife, they establish a trust, wife dies. The assets are split into two. Husband gets remarried. And the fear is that new wife will try to become the beneficiary of that entire trust that couple created. However, with that A-B split, that half is protected from the grave in that trust. The deceased wife will still be able to control of half what the estate looks like. Now, the other half could have language where the living husband could modify the trust. Did that make sense?
Oof. I'm already feeling defensive with that wife.
Okay.
So
we have other questions, but I'm trying to. I think I get it. Is one like? Are they concurrent A, B, or is like A first, then if something happens, then B, or what's the relationship between the two subtrusts?
So usually there's a family trust that's created, and at the time the deceased spouse dies, that's when the subtrusts are created, or the assets are split. So, and it's to protect half of it so that the deceased spouse's wishes are still honored.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So what if, and I think I could be leading us totally down the wrong path, but I'm thinking of the person who asked this question.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what if this actually has nothing to do with the stuff, but the way things happen? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like she wants to make sure that her partner has full say over what's done, when it's done, and gets to operate because she trusts her that much.
You just put it in there.
That's it.
I mean,
That's
it's
all
that
you-
simple.
okay.
You just take the wishes and you
Okay.
express them in a document that's controlling.
Okay.
And you could just write that out in
Yeah.
a narrative and say,
Absolutely.
but if
Okay.
both of us
Right.
pass, then
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 apply the
Yes.
apply
Yeah.
these
Okay.
principles. Okay, so it's just
Absolutely.
if, bunch of if then.
That's way more simple.
I'm sorry, my example was more complicated.
Well, no, I think it's just the different situations. Like if it's about the assets,
Right.
then the subtrust makes sense. If it's about the
Yeah.
procedure or something like
yeah.
that, then you can just write it into the trust.
You can do whatever you want, really. I mean, if
I
there's,
love hearing that.
Yeah, you can. If there's like, hey, I want this to happen while we're both alive. I want us both to have that power when we're alive.
Yeah.
Right.
But I don't want this to happen after one of us dies or both of us dies. That's the
Okay.
language that would be in there already.
You probably really get to know people in this process.
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, some of the things we talk about is that family dynamics, what they have in assets, what they want when they die.
Right.
You know, do
It's
not
deeper than the
resuscitate
typical coffee
orders.
date.
Yeah,
Like,
it
it's-
really is.
it's
No,
not
it
very-
is. It is.
Yeah.
But comes with it that attorney-client
right.
confidentiality.
That's,
So
yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough
yeah.
balancing act for sure. Okay. Any other trust questions that we missed? We've got our notes
You
because
have-
we
I
were.
know.
I printed out a bunch of questions, so we
Travis
didn't
is
get
so
off.
prepared.
Are.
You're so
Well, I'm
good at
not
this.
smart enough to not have this stuff,
This is
so
great.
that's why we need
I
it.
don't believe that.
Well, hey, okay. Let's ask you. Okay, returning guest first of all. So we've already asked you like the normal 4 questions. So I came up with
That's right.
some new
You did some
ones. So we want to just like alternate.
Sure.
You want to start with question number 1?
Okay. If you could have dinner with any fictional character, who would it be
I-
and
I-
why?
You
already
want me to
know
answer
this?
for you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Teddy Roosevelt.
He's not fictional, though.
Oh, fictional. Sorry. I was
you
thinking.
are right, though.
I was
about Teddy
thinking.
Roosevelt.
Yeah, he's
You
not,
have a
he's
thing for
he's an
Teddy?
actual person.
He's an actual person.
Yeah, I was just thinking like dead.
Yes.
Okay, fictional.
Fictional.
I
can't answer this
actually
one
was
for you.
irritated by this question when I
Why?
read it because it felt too big. It was just
Oh,
like,
too-
it was
too
a lot.
difficult
I'm
to
like, I don't
answer?
even want to think
Yeah.
about it. Okay.
I have an answer, but it would require 2 dinners.
Oh, wow.
It would
Man,
be
I'm hooked.
sounds goofy. The Grinch before,
Oh,
his moment of clarity, and the Grinch after.
that's fun.
Yeah.
So you could experience. All right.
So
Okay.
you said
That's
fictional.
interesting.
That's fictional. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Question number 2. What's the most interesting or unusual job you've ever had, and what did you learn from it?
So I was a Marine,
Yes.
as you know. So I was deployed at 19 to Somalia because of a breakdown in that country. And when I was there, one of the jobs I was assigned to do was burning human waste in large buckets and 50-gallon drums, affectionately referred
Wow.
to as burning S.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that was a very unusual job because what you had to do is you use JP5 jet fuel and you had to stir it nonstop because the ash
Mike.
would create a
would've-
laver. It would suffocate it. So note, always wear a mask. Didn't know
Yeah.
that the first time. So that was a very unusual, degrading job that every Marine I knew took advantage of, reminding me of. But in that, you know,
I have so many questions.
That's the last thing I would have thought
Yeah.
anyone would say to
Didn't see
this
that one
question.
No, I didn't see that one coming.
yeah. So that was nasty. But I did learn a lot about humility in service and being a humble leader because I didn't complain about doing it. And even though I was mocked incessantly and photographed incessantly because I was a low man on the totem pole, after that I did get some respect from it. So and I did learn to wear a mask after the first
Jeez.
time.
Wow.
Yes.
Man.
So
Oof.
That's tough.
I'm gonna, yeah.
I'm not complaining
I'm gonna
about
have
my
to recover
job.
from that one. Yeah.
I need a
Okay.
minute.
That is cool though. That
Yeah.
you've been, I mean, how
Cool?
many, I think that changes the way I would think of you. You know, it's like, how many lawyers do you know that have had this, like that kind of experience under their belt?
Oh, did I mention we didn't have showers either?
Speaking of belt, he's also a black belt.
Really?
Oh, guys,
Wow.
he's a stud.
You've got quite the
He's got quite the story.
diverse-
We just need a
Yeah.
personal interview
yeah,
with
that's,
Mike
well,
Pick.
you know how I am
totally.
what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so plane ticket to anywhere in the world right now. But
Such a great
today,
question.
Where would you go?
Belize.
Really?
Yeah,
Have you been before?
I've never been to
Okay,
Belize.
so it's on the bucket
I always want to go to Belize.
Okay.
Central American country,
What
tropical. I don't know. I read about an organic farm probably about 20 years ago that was started there, and I just kind of fell in love with the concept, the idea
Okay.
of Belize. So
I love that.
Today, it could change tomorrow, but today,
Today,
it'd be
that's where.
Belize.
I love it.
I'm believing in that one for
Yeah.
you.
Okay, question 4. I might have just answered this one for you, but what's the weirdest talent or skill that you have that most people don't know about? You're a black belt.
Yeah, I'd probably say that. I started practicing martial arts at 5, and I got my black belt at 25. And I don't come across that way. I don't think I project that way. I try to be as kind and gentle and compassionate as possible. So I think that is sometimes not obvious.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd say.
Do you still practice?
I do here and there. I haven't, for a while. I had a thing going with kids, but time and, I practice myself, but I don't teach as much.
Do you ever
anymore.
just roundhouse kick your boys in the face?
I think about it.
Yeah.
Wait, did I say that?
No.
Yeah.
We'll cut that out. Don't worry.
There's a lot of editing. that goes into this podcast.
Can we redo that one? Yeah.
No, I asked a question. I was projecting.
Yeah.
One more question. What's
Sure.
the best way if people want to engage with you about trust? What's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Just reach out to my office. I'm in downtown SLO, Pick Law Office. Really easy to find.
Okay.
And that's it. Just reach out. I have very modest consult fees. I do that on purpose to provide access to good legal advice. Reach out. We can talk about it and see if I'm a fit for you, or if I'm not, I'll get you the right attorney.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
You bet.
So nice
Mike,
getting to know you.
thanks for your time, buddy.
Likewise.
Good to see you
Welcome.
guys.
Yeah.